awkward girl on the right with the long hair and the glasses, that is me when I was 17, singing in public for the first time, and in Scots Gaelic. Horsecross Arts in Perth ran a Gaelic choir called Gley, which was meant to be a pun on a glee choir, and also the grav over the E means that the word becomes the Gaelic word for very. While I was part of the group, the five of us, along with leaders Aileen Ogilvie and Maeve McKinnon, sang all over Perthshire and even further afield to open for artists at Celtic Connections and sing on Glasgow's Celtic Music Radio. During that time, I remember someone bringing up that gospel music was born from Gaelic music. Back then I found it intriguing, but I didn't look into it any further. Now I'm interested in seeing if the two genres can be combined. This theory comes from Yale professor and jazz musician Willie Ruff, who noticed a similarity between his own Alabama church's tradition of lining out hymns and the Gaelic psalms of white churches in the Isle of Lewis.
One of the strongest parts of the whole story, the line singing or the lining out hymns.
In my mind, I said, this then would have been the first worship music that black Africans, newly arrived as slaves, would have heard in North America. This is older than the spiritual.
On one hand, I'm Scottish and American, so I feel somewhat connected to both genres. On the other hand, I'm not born Scottish, nor am I African American, so I can't claim either the gospel or the Gaelic traditions to be my own. There's no confirmed evidence that slaves actually took their music from the Scots, and while it's a good story, I can see why it's unfair to push this as a tradition that came from white people. My goal here is not to prove historical origins or accuracy, but to appreciate and explore both genres and see how the music can be combined. Because of this, I'm not just going to be looking at the two niche types of music that Willie Ruff spoke about, but I'm going to be looking at the wider genres which came from both the lining out and presenting the line traditions. To try this out, I've decided to do a genre swap. I'll be arranging a Scottish song in a gospel style and vice versa. I've chosen the songs Down to the River to Pray, which will be in a Scots folk style, and Wild Mountain Time, which will be in a gospel style a cappella trio. I felt comfortable starting with Down to the River to Pray since I'd sung it with Gley with Gaelic lyrics translated by Kenna Campbell, and these Gaelic lyrics were going to help sell the atmosphere. Scottish music often uses pentatonic scales, for example, the traditional song Mary's Wedding. I thought it would be interesting to try to adapt the melody to make it sound pentatonic. However, when I went to try it, I discovered that the melody already falls within the pentatonic scale. So I decided to add more rhythmic elements, such as Scotch snap, which is syncopation when a short note is followed by a longer note, usually a semiquaver followed by a dotted quaver. Although traditionally folk songs are not written down, I wanted to notate an arrangement to help with the recording process. I first wrote out the basic melody to Down to the River, and then I sang through it trying to add as many grace notes as possible. It sounds similar to bagpipes, which can't sing the same note in a row because they always have a drone in the background, so you try to add as much ornamentation as possible to separate the notes. I've heard Back Free Church pastor Callum Martin from Lewis singing in this style, so I tried to imitate it.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
No high me she has gone and jay. Gurneys of Alam Fakalye.
As long as I stay within the chords, I can have freedom with the vocalization, so I tried notating in a non-traditional way. While I was singing, I drew the shape to help me work out where the grace notes were being added. However, as you can see, the shape is more influenced by the overall melody than where the ornaments are added. It was still helpful in getting me to think about how and where I was including the ornamentation. Similarly, when I was beginning to arrange Wild Mountain Time, I wrote out the lyrics in a way that visually made sense to me in how they would be sung. I wrote the backing vocals under or on top of the lyrics, and wrote the lyrics how the words would be expressed, more so than the melody shape. I went on to notate it and began to work out the chords. I wanted pentatonic harmonies for both styles, so I drew out an F pentatonic scale and tried to work out what my simple chord options were. It was sounding really strange, and eventually it clicked with me that I was looking at the wrong key. The F and B flat pentatonic scales contain all the same notes, except F has an A instead of a B flat, hence my confusion. I played with the guitar chords until I was happy with them, then I added the violin part. This gave me the chance to add lots of syncopated rhythms and ornamentation that it wouldn't have been possible to sing while adhering to the confinement of the lyrics. It's also really helpful and lovely to have a fiddle, which is an iconic instrument in Scots folk. Here is the finished piece. Thinking that since I'd sorted the pentatonic issue it was going to be easy to arrange Wild Mountain Thyme, I struggled with the backing vocals until I realised that the piece is actually tonally in F major and not the pentatonic. This discouraged me because I was hoping to use the tonality to help with the gospel sound, but I didn't have the time or the skill to do the key amendment justice. Instead, I decided to change direction and aimed to make the music sound religious by using plagal cadences, aiming to move from the fourth chord to the first chord at the end of phrases, such as in a benediction. I also made sure that there was repetition between the voices to replicate call and response, which is common in gospel and religious music. When we began singing as a trio, we were focusing too hard on getting everything right. Everything was rigid and careful.
But the delivery is very restrained, very Scottish, a long way from gospel.
This presenter is talking about Gaelic Psalm, and it does seem as Scots we struggle to step away from formality. So we decided to take our sheet music out of the picture. We put it on the floor, face down, and for the first time we were making eye contact, breathing as a unit, and we became relaxed. It still seems restrained compared to gospel music, but there was certainly an atmosphere that, as we sang, we became lost in. It felt more spontaneous, and every time we sang it, it sounded a little different because we were connecting and communicating with one another. This is at the root of presenting the line and lining out. It doesn't matter what you're singing or how you're singing it, so long as you're blending with your community. So what did I learn? In short, a lot. I discovered that the things that feature in gospel music and Scottish music in theory sound fairly similar. Scottish music is ornamented and uses lots of grace notes. Same goes for gospel. Tonally, they both use similar harmonics, and even the roots of the music are similar because they both began in churches and then evolved and branched out. Even when I tried to add Scotch snap to Down to the River to Pray, it already blended in with the existing ornamentation unless I took it to the extreme. I originally thought that the similarities were going to make it easier to merge the two genres, but in reality I struggled to bring out the subtleties of each genre and vocal style with my limited compositional skills. When you listen to the two songs, it's very clear that I had a better idea of how to execute my plan with the Scottish style of music, and that less time and knowledge went into the gospel one. When I talk you through Mild Mountain Thyme, you can see what I was aiming for, but it doesn't feel to me that it hit the mark. This interview, in response to hearing Gaelic Psalm for the first time, sums up my attempt at gospel.
Didn't have as much soul.
Didn't have as much soul.
Still, it made me feel good, but it didn't have that twang that we sort of have.
This tells me that even if I'd been in a better place to tackle the style, I still probably would have fallen short, because being white, I just don't have the cultural background or experiences that black musicians bring to their music. Down to the River feels more successful in that it still resembles the original gospel song, but also has a definite Scottish feel to it. So I have proved that as a white Scottish girl, I am not the best person to sing or arrange gospel music. However, the first experiment felt more successful in combining the two genres, and just as singing in Gley helped me solidify my national identity, this project has increased my feeling of connection towards Scotland. I would love to see a jazz or a soul singer of colour do a similar experiment to mine, to see what they can bring to the table, and perhaps to see a more authentic feeling fusion. As I've discovered, the two genres may not have influenced one another, but they certainly have tonal and rhythmic similarities, and they both came from the unity of their respective churches and communities. And of course, they both sound wonderful to listen to.